Hello, this is the content video for my Unit 1, Section 1, or Lesson 1 of Biology and Environmental Science. Usually those won't be together, but for this unit, they're very, very similar, and my Day 1 lesson is almost exactly the same. So you guys are going to get one video because I don't want to make two. This is how my title slides are going to look for the beginning of chapters. They will have the course in the upper left with the unit name in the center of the screen. My name is going to be at the bottom right, and behind this video, so if you open the slides on your own, you will see a link to the vocab associated with the unit. At the beginning of every content lesson, I'm going to have learning goals for you. This is a question that we are seeking to answer with the lesson, and it kind of keeps us focused. It's the same thing that would appear on the whiteboard behind me if I were teaching you guys in person, and it would also be our wrap-up question for the day. So today's lesson learning goal is, what are the essential parts of a good experiment? So in science, when we are seeking to know anything or find out about something, we're going to use something called the scientific method. You have probably heard about this before. You guys are sophomores and juniors. You probably have seen this since middle school, so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. All right. If you need more help, you can go research that on your own. You can send me emails. You can contact me. All right. Make sure to contact me if you have questions. So remember that science is focused on knowing how or why things happened. So the scientific method is just a series of steps that scientists use to actually research and find out why or how they happen. The first step is to observe. It's to make observations. It's this top one in red. So you're going to look at the world around you. You're going to find out. You might smell something. You might hear something. You might have a texture that you're feeling. It's not just limited to using your eyes. The second one is to ask a question or to identify a problem. Why does that happen? How does that happen? Hey, engineers might use this to be like, hey, we need to cross a big open expanse with a bridge. So our problem is we need a bridge. We might also have things like needing to have a clean, renewable source of energy or cut down on carbon emissions. The best first step, and this gets left out sometimes, but I like to include it, is research. Go look at what other people have done. You don't want to be spending your time doing something if others have already done it, especially in science. There is no Nobel Prize for the second person to do anything. There's no name recognition for the second person to find something out. So go look at what they've already done. This also helps you better make a hypothesis. We're going to talk more about the hypotheses a bit later, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Hypothesis is just a educated guess as to why it's happening, and we're going to use if and then statements in my class to write hypotheses. Then you try out your hypothesis. You test it. You design an experiment that will only test one variable at a time, and that will allow you to see if your hypothesis is right or wrong. That's the only thing an experiment can do. Right? So when you actually test the hypothesis, you're going to go through the experiment. You're going to do the experiment. You may do it 3 or 4 times. When I was in college working on my undergraduate degree, I would do experiments 10 to 30 times. When I was writing my research, I was doing experiments much larger than that because of the content of my actual experiments where they needed to be reproducible. Next, you're going to draw conclusions. So you're going to look at what the hypothesis test actually did, the data that it generated, and we are going to say, was our hypothesis right or wrong? If your hypothesis is wrong in real world, you would go back and try again because you still want to solve this problem. You still want to answer your question, right? In high school, however, we usually don't have time for that because we've got 50-minute periods or, like today, you guys are stuck at home. I'm here. We can't really work through that together. In science, we also need to be able to communicate our findings. So we're going to write reports. We're going to write discussion posts. We're going to write articles for journals. Journals here are not the little black and white books that you write in for composition notebooks. You're not writing like, Dear Diary, how was my day? This is you writing a very detailed, very exact accounting of what happened and why it happened. It may also be saying, hey, someone else needs to look into this because there are some things that aren't clear yet. So no matter what, our report sharing what we found is important in science. Because if you've done it, you don't want someone else who's answering another question or your question to have to do the same thing again. That's wasting their time, right? So you want someone else in the research phase to find your answers. Right, so hypotheses. I told you we'd talk more about them. Here it is. So hypothesis is a reasonable explanation for what has been observed. So like I said earlier, observations aren't just done with your eyes. Every sense can be used for observations. You may even augment those senses, build them up with, say, a microscope or a microphone to hear things you can't hear, to see things you can't see. There's something called a gas spectrometer that will smell things that you can't smell. Right? A hypothesis is always a statement and never a question. So it needs to be a sentence. It needs to say something will happen or something should happen. Though I want you guys to try to avoid using the word should for some grammatical mistakes that can be avoided. Easy way to do that is to use if and then statements. So I've given you an example if and then statement here. If, and remember our brackets are things that are going to be replaced. So if I do this, then this will happen. So I've got a good example with this green check mark and a bad example with this X. So if I never water my plant, then it will dry out and will die. So I've got an if and a then, so it's following my layout. It is testable, right? We can just not water the plant and see what happens. And it's not a question, right? If I sing to my plant, then it will be happy. So we've got an if and a then statement, but can we test if a plant is happy? No, we can't. Your hypothesis needs to be able to have an experiment designed to actually test it. So things to look out for. These are those red flags, the mistakes that are easy to make, but they are also easy to avoid. So no opinions. Those aren't testable. My hypothesis can't be if I eat an onion, I won't like it, having never ate an onion, right? That's an opinion, if you like it or not. It must make a claim. We need to be able to compare those outcomes. So remember, statements are just sentences, but some sentences make claims while others don't. If and then statements always make claims, which is why I want you to use them. They're also always testable, all right? It makes it very easy for anything we do in class to use an if and then statement. A test shouldn't be a one-time opportunity. So an experiment should not be able to only be ran once. I want you guys to be able to run experiments a couple of times. 2 or 3 times is usually good for the precision we need in high school level stuff. If you continue on into college and academia at a higher level, you're going to need to run them more than that. Precision is better than vague. So in your hypotheses, I want you to avoid could or seems. Those are inherently, that means they're by their own nature, vague. Could happen. Yeah, it may or may not. That's still a could happen, right? We want something that will happen or will not happen. Then I want you to try to include independent and dependent variables, right? So looking back at our example, if I never water my plant, then it will dry out and will die. So my independent variable, what I'm changing is watering the plant. The dependent is the plant's life and what the soil will look like, dry out and die. All right. So if you haven't noticed yet, I'm going to try to put vocabulary words in these italics, the slanted writing, right? So they're easy to see. It won't happen every time, but on a slide that is trying to show you the definition, I'm going to try to do that, all right? So a test of the hypothesis is an experiment, right? And it's going to show us if the hypothesis is correct or incorrect, right? A hypothesis might require a couple of different experiments to fully test it. So the one with the plant, you may want to test whether the plant dying and the soil drying out are two different outcomes, right? So you'd want two different experiments for that. But in our experiments, we're only going to change one variable at a time. Remember, a variable is something that will change, right? So we only want one thing to change at a time. That way we know that we are for certain that that is the reason for the change. Controls are what allow us to compare the experiment with the actual treatment that we're doing. So we want to make sure that nothing else changes. A control is something that doesn't change. So we have two different types of variables, independent and dependent variables. I remember independent variable because it starts with an I, and I'm the one changing it. All right. Dependent depends on the other variable. So dependent, right inside the word dependent, is the word depend. That's how I remember that. All right. Easy way to do that is that's the thing you have to actually measure, okay, versus what you're changing. Keep these two straight in your head. Learn those vocab words, guys and ladies. So constants are anything that's not being changed, and a control group is a replication, a copy of your experiment, but you're not doing anything. You're not actually changing anything. This could be what's naturally occurring. It could be like with our plant, you just leave the plant alone, or it could be you continue watering the plant, right? Because our example back here is if I never water my plant, our control would be another plant that is of the same species and size and age in the same soil, in the same lighting conditions, but we're going to water it instead. That's all. All right, so continuing with the plant concept here, right? This one is just a mock-up of independent variable, dependent variable, and something that's controlled. All right, so this is again giving you some example, some definitions, right, and some specificity. It's showing you exactly what it is. All right, this is a great diagram to study from. When we are working on science, I know my head's in the screen. I'll move it to the other side. There, now you should be able to read the whole thing. So while we are trying to do science, because science is an action that you do it, it's a verb, not a noun. I want you to have these habits, these outlooks on life. I want you to always be curious, ask questions. One of my biggest things is asking questions. Especially as you guys get older, you need to be asking questions for yourself. Skepticism. Don't believe what you're told. Go and check it out. Go do your research. If you we all know the concept of people seeing what they believe, what they see on social media and just believing it. Don't do that. Apply that to real life too. Go look for answers. And that applies to the things that I'm teaching you too. If you aren't believing me, go Google it. If you need help with that, let me know. I will help you. I can provide sources for everything that I teach you. All right? I want you to have an openness to new ideas. Even if someone seems a little crazy, I want you to hear them out and then go back and do your research. All right? If it's something that you don't agree with, do your research. Find out if it's really the truth or not. Intellectual honesty covers a lot of things. It covers things like plagiarism, finding someone else's ideas and saying that they're yours, like Thomas Edison. He did that a lot. It also covers things like falsifying data, lying about your results. The idea that vaccines cause autism comes from a guy that lied about his results for money because someone paid him to. He lost everything. Nobody trusts anything that he does, and he had to get it completely completely different job because he lied about his data. I also want you to have some imagination and creativity. Finding new solutions to problems, even ones that have already been solved, are big. Think about it. We have cars, right? An electric car, though, that makes money. It also solves a problem of having too much carbon emissions from your vehicles. So even if something seems like it's already been solved, taking a second look at it and finding a different answer is okay. There is more than one right answer to things. Right. That is the end of today's lesson. So this is the end of 1.1. We'll start at 1.2 in a couple of days. Make sure you get all of your work done on the LMS, right? That's going to, after this content video, you'll have a couple exercises I want you to do, including another discussion forum where you're going to write a response to the video and maybe list any questions you have. And you're going to do another post test. That one's going to be graded. It is just saying what you learned today. If you want to study for that, go ahead. After that, tomorrow you're going to have some homework that will pop up as more stuff to do. All right? Have a good day.